Servus, Matthias Eichler here, and I am with Steph Decker today, who's back on Single Track. With her, we are traveling to France to drink wine and eat cheese. But mostly we check in and hear about her injury that sidelined her big summer project we talked about in a previous episode right before the summer. It's not all doom and gloom though, as there are new dreams and more exciting projects on the horizon. Grab a glass of wine and let's chat about a couple more items from the Single Track Holiday Gear Gift Guide. The Salomon Outrack Waterproof 2.5 liter jacket. What a name, 2.5 liter. Not sure what that refers to, but the item is totally sold out already. Why am I still naming it? Because I do hope it's coming back in stock, especially in the cool color that I got it, green and pink and stuff. But when my Euro race, UTMR, asked for a rain jacket for mountain weather, I knew that my Patagonia Houdini would not cut it. Gore-Tex jackets aren't just pricey, but for runners they're also huge sweat boxes, so I was left with finding something in between. This jacket is rugged, but still feels light, and the cool look is a perfect bonus. Visit Salomon.com, that's SALOMON.com, but of course you knew that. This jacket, the Outrack Waterproof 2.5 liter, is one of my favorite items of the year. Get it. Well, get it when it's back in stock. Next up, the Nathan Pinnacle 12-liter hydration race vest. My first running vest was over-researched many years ago as I was trying to find a running vest that could sort of do it all. Mountain adventures and races and around town and stuff. Now, years later, I have many vests for many different occasions, but this Nathan Pinnacle could just become the vest to do it all. It's lightweight material that hugs your body. It's easy to adjust, no frill straps, and still plenty of space in the back and lots of pockets up front in all the right places. Really, the only downside is that it doesn't have pole straps for tracking poles. Find a vest at REI or at nathansports.com. Need more cool gift ideas? Head to singletrack.fm/gear to see them all. Oh, and while you're there, grab a Single Track t-shirt. All right, here's Steph, and we are already at the airport.
I'm visiting my sister, and I just put together, I have this, manila envelope of, all these documents that I have to carry with me, in addition to my passport, just to, I don't know, there's just so much going on.
No, it's crazy. I mean, I went through that this summer when I took a family of 4 over. So we actually had a manila envelope times 4. Well, and, because our kids are old enough, they're almost 13 and 16, right? They sort of need to hold on to their own documents.
Right,
so, it's not like you have a toddler in your arm that you can say, here's the passport for me and my, child. It's sort of, you got to give them their own stuff. And, they all had the vaccination cards. And then we needed to get tests 72 hours before flying, and you don't know if the results are coming back in time and stuff, and you don't know if you get the right test, and it's nerve-wracking. And then you need to get a test over there before flying back. So at least you have your sister living over there who knows the way around, because she can sort of find test centers and figure this stuff out for you, right? Because when we went, we were super lucky because the race that I ran, they offered post-race testing. So they actually had a testing lab that they had, that they were required to set up for all the racers to get tested before the race. But then they were smart enough to say, well, after the race, everybody needs to fly back home. So we keep the lab around for the day after the race, and anybody can come, and you have to pay for your own test, but they would do a rapid test right there, which was super, super helpful for me.
Oh, that's awesome. My sister has been immensely helpful. She told me about this, and I think Washington is doing this as well, where you get a QR code to go into like public spaces, like museums and restaurants, and but you have to like provide a lot of documentation.
It's actually very easy. It's actually, if you're in Washington, it's very easy.
Yeah.
All you need to do, there's a website. Have you done it already?
I haven't. I've just been. I did the one for France, but
Oh, okay.
I haven't done the one for Washington.
Yeah. No, because so there, I think there are two things. So just quickly, the Washington one. There's a website, and you go, and if you just, when you got vaccinated, you provided a phone number, name, and a date of birth, and you put that into a website. And they will send you a link to that phone number within 24 hours to verify that, it's really you. You click on that link, and then do you have an iPhone, or do you have a...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have an iPhone.
And then they get you one of those cards that goes into your wallet app, where you have your gift cards and your bank cards and stuff for Apple Pay. And then you basically get... this card that sits in that wallet app and that has the QR code that people can scan that will then link to your personal information. So that's how it works for Washington.
Yeah. I'm going to be curious how it works in when I'm over in France, but like it was just interesting because I'm so skeptical when I have to provide like any kind of personal identity information. And so like I think one of the things like that threw me off initially was, you email like your passport and your itinerary and your COVID vaccine card and all of these things and your driver's license, like some personal information to like a government email address. I mean, and it looks legitimate, but it kind of like is like just there's so many, I feel like, places out there that you could eventually like, I don't know, like people's identity is stolen all the time, and so you're just kind of like, I just get very skeptical. But
it is super tough, and I mean, I guess you can turn it around and you can say because everyone's identity is anyway stolen already, so to have it stolen one more time does not make a difference. I feel like every other month I'm getting a letter from some banking or medical or something like, oh, I'm sorry, we've had a data breach.
I know. And it's like the moments where I actually, like when I bought my plane ticket, my bank the transaction kept getting declined. Like, so the time I needed to like use my credit card or whatever to purchase something, my bank was like, you're making some, you're making like this like weird purchase that you never do. Mm-hmm. And then like, I had to like tell them, no, it's really me. And yes, I'm getting a plane ticket. And like, then they asked me all these like questions about like, tell us about the last like 3 transactions you made. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have like goldfish memory anyway. I don't know how I'm going to remember this.
Yeah.
So anyway.
No, it's true. I used to not have a problem with that, and since I'm now banking with a smaller bank, they do lock my card when I go out of the normal transaction sort of geographic realm. And I've just, because I'm so used to it, I've just come to sort of the practice of calling them up whenever I fly or go outside and say, hey, I'm going to make transactions here, open this thing up. And then they're like, okay, we'll make a note in the account. I'm like, yeah, please, you do.
Yeah, it's, I've been banking with a credit union for like several years. And, I think before that, I never really had any issues, but it was with a much larger bank. But I definitely I'd rather have them call me and ask me these questions than have it slip beneath the cracks and then someone take my identity and, whatever. But it's good to just
or have to go through the hassle of having to dispute charges from all over and having to get new cards issued and stuff like that. So I appreciate it, but yes, it was sort of a surprising change when all of a sudden this became an issue. And I don't know if that has something to do with the fact that we switched to smaller banks, or if it had something to do with the fact that times just changed and every bank sort of adopted these kind of rules, right?
Yeah.
So since we're already talking about Europe, we're like deep into this, and I'm gonna find a way of including all of this on the show as well. Tell me about your upcoming trip to France, because this is all very, very exciting for me. And this is a podcast recorded in the Pacific Northwest, and I could only talk about Europe. So you're going to France. When, where, how, what, why?
So I just kind of made a last minute decision that I was gonna go see my sister for Thanksgiving. And, I decided to do that mainly because I was transitioning. I transitioned out of, my current job, and I had some time, and I thought, well, I'm just going to go see my sister. And I haven't seen her since, we talk on FaceTime or whatever, but I haven't seen her in person since probably late 2019. So she's a performer. She performs like aerial acrobatics. And she's also a sommelier. So she kind of lives in this lifestyle of, arts and wine. And it's very different from my life. But, I don't know, I think what makes us different is also what makes our relationship really exciting, as sisters. And I'm just really excited to get back and see her. Thanksgiving is a holiday that has always been really important in our family, like most families. Probably more so than like Christmas or any of like those kind of Western holidays. I just had time, and I kind of wanted to go see her, and flights weren't, through the flight prices weren't through the roof. And, it was a lot easier to work-wise just to be able to go and not have to really think about work. And, I think the COVID restrictions for travel has obviously made it, a little bit easier. But she's living in Beaune, which is, about 3 hours outside of Paris by train, I think. And so she's been living there for a couple years now. She moved back to Paris for a little bit, but, her lifestyle out there is really fun. And we get on FaceTime usually in the mornings, and she was showing me her apartment, that she lives in with her partner. And, I'm just excited to see her lifestyle and just see what she's been up to. It's just, I feel like, when you haven't seen your sister or family member or friend, in person for so long, it's just kind of it's just exciting. And I've also never been to France. I've been to, I went to, Amsterdam, but I have not ventured to other parts of Europe. So I'm excited to also have that experience too.
So for our American listeners, no, French people do not celebrate Thanksgiving. That's a wholly North American holiday for obvious reasons if you think this through. And the reason why I make this joke is because when I first moved over here, people were asking what my folks back home in Germany were doing for Thanksgiving. And I was like, not really something that is happening over in Europe. So number one, so that's an important public service announcement. The second is you're basically like creating your own holiday movie situation, right? Girl from the Pacific Northwest who lives out of a van. No, I'm sorry. I'm kidding. But goes to to Paris for the holiday. I mean, that sounds magical.
Yeah. Well, if anyone actually has a story to tell about their life in Paris, it's probably, or in France, it's probably my sister. I mean, she owned her business. She owned a business in Seattle, and she basically kind of like picked everything up and moved to France to become a sommelier, and also like somehow integrate that with her love for the arts and theater and dance. And I think it was really feasible for her to do that there. You know, it's just been, I think the hardest thing has probably been just the language and learning the language, and just always kind of being in two places in your mind where you're thinking in English, but you're speaking in French. And, you know, sometimes like she was talking about how sometimes she comes home and her partner like will talk to like, and she's had like a long day, and her partner will talk to her in French, and she just responds in English like, no, not right now.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they laugh about that. But yeah, no, my sister's story is like really, really fascinating, how she just kind of like, yeah, she just kind of picked everything up and moved to France. And it definitely wasn't an easy transition, and it's been one that she's been, like developing and refining over the last few years since she's lived there. And, you know, and when COVID happened, you know, she was working a few different jobs, and, suddenly kind of had to like pivot and figure out what she was going to do. And so she, you know, she had a little bit of savings, and, decided to kind of immerse herself in, the world of wine, and learning about it. And I can't tell you anything about it because I don't know very much about it. But it's definitely a passion of hers. And so now she's kind of this, she works for a company that's based in California. She's like what they call like a wine correspondent. And so she does all of these, little short YouTube videos about wine in France, and then for this company that's in California. And so then they share all this information with their customers. And she sent me a video that she made about herself as like an American celebrating Thanksgiving in France, and how like she marries those things with wine and cheese. And she talked to you know, a local cheesemaker, and it's just really cool. She's a lot more, graceful on camera and talking about these things than I could ever visualize myself. But, yeah, she made a life for herself out there. And I think the cool thing about that is because she just really wanted it. And she just kind of made it happen. And I know that like, in a nutshell, she kind of just made it happen, but there's a lot that went into it, that I think, you know, is admirable.
I hope that when you're going to be over there, that you're going to be eating absolutely exceptional and drinking amazing wine.
Yeah. I don't drink that often, but I am probably going to like let go a little bit and just really like savor the wine and the cheese. And from what I understand, you experience France once you've had the bread. And bread over there is, I've heard, just kind of a whole amazing experience in and of itself. And, it's funny because, well, maybe not funny, but like so I recently kind of figured out that I have, celiac. And so I'm debating like, oh, do I just kind of bite the bullet, or do I, can eat bread, or do I just like,
bite the bullet, bite the bullet, bite the bullet. Start.
Well, thankfully my symptoms and my, the reactions that I get from having gluten aren't as bad as some people, but, so I'm heavily considering the bread experience over there. So.
It would actually be very, very interesting to me how you experience it, because I've been reading, and I'm not doing heavy research on that part of the reason why people have gluten issues over here in the US is because the wheat is so overly processed and genetically modified. And so if you eat really good bread over there, I'd be hoping for you that it won't actually affect you as much. That's my thought, but I have no idea. I'm not a medical provider. This is not an endorsement of anything. Please, dear listeners.
And like, as we think about like all the food that we eat, during the Thanksgiving holiday, it's kind of one of those things where, well, I'm probably not going to be able to really enjoy it like during Thanksgiving. So maybe like I'll just like have a little bit here and there, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm saying I'm not going to eat it, but I don't really know. We'll see. I might get there and just be like, give me all the croissants you can give me.
I would bet. I really hope you're not paying a price for that indulgence. But that sounds amazing. Super happy for you to be able to take this trip. Hopefully you get to experience Europe in a good and magical way. Going into the holidays, COVID is still a thing over there as much as it's over here.
For sure.
But
I'm hoping to find some good trails over there. I haven't scoped out Strava.
I think Strava can be super helpful in that. The other thing, just for fun, is go on to the fastest known time website too.
Oh, right.
Because even if you don't set yourself out to try to break a fastest known time, but you could potentially find some interesting routes that people have been running, or portions of routes. Because when I looked, there were quite a few routes that were actually shorter distances, right? They weren't like these things that you would train for 3 years for. They were just like, okay, here's a 20-mile or even a 20K loop or so that circumnavigates this old historic town, and you're just weaving in and out of vineyards or something like that, right? And there's some cool routes, so you could look there too.
Yeah, and I think there's actually, speaking of running through vineyards, I think there's like a race that happens like, I think on the 20th. So maybe that like weekend and I think it's like a half marathon that runs through the vineyards of Beaune. And I was thinking, well, it might be nice to, run on some runnable terrain, for a change compared to like the wet, sloppy, rainy environment we've all been in lately. But
are you telling me you're potentially running a race over there, or you would just run the route?
Maybe running a race. I don't know. I think there's like hundreds of people that run in this race, so I'm just kind of a little bit weary of that. But I imagine that they're taking certain precautions for COVID and things like that. But it looks pretty cool. It might be a great way to see some places around that area that, I otherwise probably wouldn't see. And, and I also I was thinking, I'd look at some Strava segments and see, cause I always love looking at Strava segments to see, not like, similar to FKT, it's like you look and see like where people have run, not necessarily to
you're not trying to get crowns over there, right?
Yeah.
in between wine and cheese, but but definitely finding some places where people like to run. For sure, it's super helpful for that.
Yeah. So looking forward to that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I don't know, just being somewhere different, that I've never been. I think to see family and to see a new place and to be in a different culture, I think is really great.
And be able, right? If you have somebody over there, you can sort of break down the cultural and language barrier, right? I mean, just going with your sister into a grocery store or in things like that, right? Is super fun and such a great way of getting to know a culture and spending time, right? So it's fantastic. Love it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I'm very excited.
So we did a look into the future, the very, very near future. We do need to be, though, a little bit retrospective, because the last time you were on the show, you talked about a really big project, and I don't want to open a sore can of worms, but you talked about a big project you were working on, and then you got injured, and you had to completely abandon and postpone it. So I think we need to briefly talk about what happened and where you're at with that.
Yeah, that was kind of a very unexpected call I had to make.
Did we jinx it?
I hope not, because then I don't even know, should I be on this podcast right now, because I have other things planned this summer.
Oh no, exactly. Well, I mean, I think you have to be on this podcast right now because we have to prove that you didn't jinx it, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing about, I feel like in this world of ultra distance trail running, like running just in general, is I think that no matter how much you try and prevent an injury is kind of inevitable, whether it be like physical or like emotional and, mental challenges and all of that stuff. But I think, this was something that I think that it kind of came up when I did this vertical challenge in May with some friends. I think it was something in so I injured my left ankle when I did Grand Canyon. And then, I did this vertical challenge, event with some friends, totally like unofficially. We were just like out seeing how many laps of this, like loop we could do. I think it's like 3.5, 4 miles up, and it's like you gain like 1,000 feet, and then you run back down, and then you see how many times you can do that in 12 hours. So it was good, but I think I acquired some sort of a stress injury and didn't really understand like what was going on. And so what was weird about this injury is I would feel pain when I would feel pain. Like, so, and it was like whenever I everted my ankle just slightly, a very specific certain way. And so it was like, I would go, and when I did LBA, I didn't feel it at all. And I just ran hard, I ran fast, and I felt great. But then, like a week later, I would go on just a regular run and I would feel it. But I would feel it very minor. And then some other runs that were a little bit shorter, or like I think I even went on a walk one time and I felt it. And it was just like so weird. So sometimes I would feel it and sometimes I would not. And I didn't understand what was really going on. And then, and I would rest it and, kind of give it that attention that it needed. I build in strength training to a lot of my, just regular running training, because that's a big thing that has helped me be a better runner or a stronger runner. And so I I don't know. I just like went and had an x-ray done and everything looked normal. And then I had an MRI done and apparently I had a stress fracture going on in there, and which was just like so deflating. And so then my doctor was like, my sports med doc, and he's awesome. He understands my my drive and my persistence with my running, but he also and I also understand his his medical advice too. And so we always do a really great job of meeting in the middle and kind of seeing how I feel and checking in. And so we kind of just decided, okay, so we'll do like, so he's like, I suggest that you take just a few weeks off. And I was like, okay, that means I can't do these loops. So that kind of, that I wouldn't say that I basically just put that on a shelf, and because I'm not done with it yet. But I also acknowledge that I invested, both Calvin and I, we did a lot of scouting trips, and another friend of ours when we went over to Graves Creek, we did a lot of scouting and just invested a lot of time. And so I think that was like the biggest thing I had to sit with, which was like my whole summer was kind of dedicated to doing this work of scouting, and then hopeful in putting this plan together in which a lot of people were involved, and just, being kind to myself and knowing that like just this kind of stuff happens. And so although there were a lot of people involved, I had to kind of give myself a break and say to myself, like, this isn't over yet. And hopefully I'm hopeful my friends will forgive me for maybe tying up part of their summer, and then suddenly with plans, and then suddenly those not following through. But I'm not really going, just like, Grand Canyon, I'm not going to give up on actually trying to get it done and do it, because I think that it means a lot to me. And I think that's like the difference between, maybe, not doing something and doing something is kind of what meaning and value it gives to you. But, just a little niggle of an injury that just kind of kept getting persistent. And I thought it would just be safer and better to pause on that and reevaluate. And, I'm actually not going to I don't have plans to do the loops again this summer, because I want to go play in the Sawtooths.
Before you jump into the next thing, let me just say, I know you're itching. I've got plans already. No, I think you did. It's tough, right? When you plan a big project like that, you have to involve other people. Then you set expectations for them, for yourself, and that's frustrating. But you did the smart decision to call it before they were all waiting at some trailhead and you didn't show up, or, you ran for 20 miles of a project that was supposed to be a couple of hundred and plus, and you had to call it then, right? So I think it's tough. Because, my entire podcast is about talking about projects. And so I think we do set expectations for us by talking about them. And we do have to give ourselves the grace to say this is how this sport works, both in the actual physical nature of the sport and sort of in the reality that we are working and operating in an incredible privileged environment, right? Being able to do these kind of runs, being able to spend this kind of time, being healthy, have the money to buy the gear and stuff is something that takes priority because we love it, but it's not life and death. And so we need to find a way of properly prioritizing it, right? So you did the right thing for the longevity of your body and you being able to enjoy that sport. Some people get injured and they're so done that they're literally done afterwards and never want to see running shoes again.
Yeah, and I think it like all goes, I mean, we talk about this like as like one of those like pillars of running is like figuring out like what keeps bringing you back to the sport if you like, you know, get injured or just need some time doing something else. You know, it's just like what brings you back. And, you know, it seems in my mind, I always see the phrase like, what's my why of running? And it is, I see it so much that it almost seems a little cliche, but it's so true because like what brings me back to this gnarly place in the mountains is totally different than what brings you back or what brings other people back in the moments where we take a step back. And so I think that like, I remember what you said last time we talked about this is like the trails in the Olympics they're like more of hiker trails and moving slowly through the Olympics is kind of a thing that happens. And, you know, there are people out there that can just really tackle the technical parts of the terrain out there. But, you know, the last thing I wanted was to get out there and do, like the average distance that we would be covering in each loop would be like probably 50-ish miles. And so and it's not a fast 50 miles. It's a technical, like lots of vert. And I just didn't want to get out there and, you know, after like, you know, a little, you know, after, you know, like doing one loop, just think to myself, oh, I should have waited and just really collected myself and like come back and reevaluated this, you know, when I had a better, cleaner perspective. And so I felt that would be easier to not do it and then reevaluate and know that I got all of the homework done as much as I could have out there. So we did the scouting, we understood like the conditions, you know, it's that I think there was one part of like all the Southern Olympics are just really gnarly in my mind, in my opinion, you know, like the Skyline loop, it's just a really, really rocky trail. Even when you get high in the ridges. And so I just felt like it would be easier to take a step back and pause and then come back at a time where I was hopefully healthier and just kind of had some breathing room and doing something different, because I think that's also important to have in running is other activities that make you happy too, you know, whether it's bike riding or going out to lunch with friends or going for a walk or, you know, because I think that's what keeps us healthy too.
No, for sure. I think this is the perfect conversation for this time of year, because you do make a little bit of an assessment of what you have achieved for the year in running. Your Strava numbers are racking up. You kind of know where you're at, you know, and if you're not a numbers person, then you might look at your photos for the year or whatever it is. There's just sort of a little bit of an assessment there. And I remember many years, almost every year, there are some goals that you set for yourself that you didn't achieve. For me, for years, it was running the enchantments. It was something that wasn't very difficult in terms of mileage, but logistically, it was just something that wasn't like right out the front door. And I mean, every fall, when I still hadn't done it, when the largest season were over and the snow was covering, you know, there comes this moment of sadness a little bit. And then you have to then look at it and say, well, wait a second. Yeah, sure, this goal is still out there. And every time I have a goal on a list that I don't achieve, I can't really move on, or my list gets just bigger and bigger. But at the same time, if we, well, either were injured or you talked about all your scouting trips, right? You make it sound like they were just like, oh yeah, these scouting trips. I mean, those trips were still amazing trips that you had, right?
Yeah.
And that's obviously very different than if you would have just spent an entire year only in a gym, in some weight room, like getting ready for something, not seeing the light of day, and then getting injured before you actually step a foot out there, right? I mean, most of our preparation trips are actually still out on these trails. So they still create amazing moments and experiences, both with the people that we run and in the places that we get to play, right?
Yeah. And I don't discount like any, and any of the stuff in between that like helps me to be like a mentally, psychologically stronger runner. I think that just is, that's just as powerful as being physically strong too, because, sometimes when we get injured, it's just like, you just feel like, what is the purpose right now? I had so many moments where I was like, I'm so tired of like, going after these things and, and then just kind of feeling deflated when they don't work out. But like, that's just what comes, that is sometimes, most of the time, what comes with, doing harder things. And even these scouting trips were just like, we'd go out there and we're like, okay, we're going to do this whole route to scout. Like we planned to do 40 some odd miles on the skyline. And we just got out there and I was like, you know what? I'm hot. I'm tired. Like we were 20-ish miles in, I think. And my ankle was just like, just really bothering me. And, but it was like, it would come and go and come and go. And it was just like that constant, influx of, little triggers of pain that I was having. Just kind of, I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I think we accomplished what we needed to out here. We have a good sense of like the terrain. And I think that like, let's just call it.
Yeah.
And that honestly was like, that just gave me like so much peace of mind to be like, well, I came out and I set out what I needed to do. My intentions, I felt like were fulfilled, and I feel mentally better now, rather than just like pushing myself through something that's just like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I pushing my body through something that it just isn't agreeing with right now? And one thing, like, I think like is really important to like think about, when we're talking about like objectives, and is to also like appreciate and focus on like smaller things too that might not like, like one of the things I think my running coach told me to think about is, maybe having a lot of smaller objectives to like pursue, and instead of, for right now. And so then that can help like build my confidence up that I can do these bigger things. Cause I don't think that like, it's like, I don't know if it's a confidence thing or something, but I definitely feel like there's value in like, doing smaller objectives too. Ones that might, maybe it's not 200 plus miles through wild terrain. Maybe it's just like, I don't know, maybe it's like a really cool vert challenge, and maybe it's like, some get together with friends, or like a smaller race or something like that.
I do think we need these big hairy goals to sort of dream about and strive towards, for sure. But these big hairy goals, they don't just require the weather to play along and your body physically to be perfect for the moment, and you mentally. And they often also require a level of logistics. You talked about all your friends that you had sort of roped into supporting you on this Olympic Loops project. And one thing that's sort of fun, it's a little bit similar like when it's springtime and you get to run for the first time with not all of your gear that you needed in the wintertime, right? That lightness of being able to just go. And that's how I feel with those smaller projects. Sometimes it's nice to just take a trip to a trailhead and knock something out just by yourself, right? And saying, I'm self-sufficient. I can just do this. I don't need sort of this. I don't need to sign up for a race. I don't need to ask somebody to do this and this with me or for me. And so I think that helps both in the confidence builder, but also in that giving of you this level of satisfaction and completion and stuff. So I think those are great, right? We shouldn't only focus on these because we're probably short selling ourselves.
Yeah. Totally agree.
But finding joy in those is, I think, what makes it all worthwhile. So let me ask you this then. Of all of your things that you did, what were one or two truly special moments you've had this year on the trails?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, that's obviously a fair question because that is easy to narrow down. Then just a moment where you're like, this is why I do what I do.
Oh my gosh. Like, it's hard to pinpoint one or two. But I just think that the whole task of getting out and scouting these trails for this Olympic Loops project was something that I think, because I was dealing with a lot of stuff injury-wise and didn't really realize it. But I feel like just doing all of that work was really gratifying because I feel that it set me up for success to know what I need, how I need to approach things when I am ready, like physically and mentally ready to really say, okay, this is the summer, I'm going to do this. I think that was one thing that I was really proud of this summer. And on top of that, accepting and being okay and moving forward with grace that, it's okay that I couldn't do it this summer because my body is just like, we're not ready. And I think being able to process all of that and not, beat myself up too much about it was a really valuable thing for me. And I think, gosh, I'm trying to think of all these. I'm trying to think back to what I actually did this summer. I think there was, we just spent so much time out there in the Olympics that I think that just being out there and also moments of just, I think I did one time I think we did we took the trail on the North Fork of the Skokomish from Staircase, and we went up Black and White. Mm-hmm. And that is super steep and just and up to Flapjacks. And that was, I remember getting to the top and leaning on my trekking poles and just being like, I'm so tired, but I'm so happy to be here right now. And I think that those moments are why I keep getting out there is because I'm really tired or I feel really good. And no matter what, it's I'm doing something new and I'm pushing myself in a way that, is challenging. And I just love doing that, just seeing what my body is capable of. but just being patient with it too, because, I think we can be physically ready to do something and we can be mentally ready, but sometimes it's just, sometimes it doesn't work out in our favor. And I think having the grace to move forward and talk about what we've learned and our takeaways can make the next attempt even better.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you still have the dream of wanting to do these projects, because let me tell you, having completed Cushman 6, which was something that I had dreamed about some variation of for years, it leaves you proud, but it also leaves you a little bit empty, because I have not, well, this year I got a little bit derailed by focusing on races and then running in Europe, but I've not really come up with a dream that I feel like is of equal value and worth pursuing with the same focus and passion. And so I'm a little bit empty. I don't really, right? I mean, it's easy for me to say, well, you could just run around the volcanoes and stuff, right? I mean, there are dozens of routes that I still can, could, should check off, but nothing that has, for me, the same amount of excitement, right? And, I mean, that's not me trying to be arrogant and saying running around Mount St. Helens wouldn't be an awesome experience. Of course it would be. But from a dream, from a project, from something to build up towards, nothing has caught my attention since Cushman 6. And so...
That's interesting.
I know. I feel a little bit empty. I'm okay with it, and I'm okay with it. I was okay with it this year because I got these races sort of spun into my running life, sort of by surprise a little bit, and so I focused more on those. And so because I had the experience on the races, I didn't really do much. Like I wasn't at Rainier the entire year. I think it's the first year in ever that I've not been at least once at Rainier this year, which was weird, right? But it's weird that I've not really come up with a good equal project, which then brings me to my question that you've been waiting for me to ask. Next summer, you have a project lined up, and I'm excited to hear because, I don't have one, so I want to hear what yours is.
Well, I don't want to jinx it. On the podcast.
I know it's tough. You have to make that decision now.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think I've also felt like I definitely want there to be a long effort focus somewhere in there. And I know after this summer, kind of, you think, okay, Steph, well, what about why don't we try something smaller or a bunch of I was just talking earlier about that stuff, but then, my brain is kind of I really like just I really enjoy long grinding runs. Even if it's not grinding in a negative sense, where you're just oh my gosh, this is trudging up this giant mountain, or this just technical trail that I just want something runnable. I'm just talking about just putting forth a really long effort. I really love that. And so I also had in 2020, I spent a little bit of time in the Sawtooths, and I really loved it out there. And I really wanted to go back, and I thought maybe I would go back this summer. And, but I just didn't have time with, and I just thought it'd be easier to focus my efforts on this loop project, just because I juggle a full-time job and all of these things.
What do you mean? You have a life? Come on. So if you say Sawtooth, you need to be a little bit more specific, because I feel like they're every time there are 3 peaks next to each other here in the U.S. It's called the
Yes.
Sawtooth. So which Sawtooth are you
There's like the
referring to?
Sawtooth in the North Cascades, and then down in the Olympics, but there's also the Sawtooths in Idaho, and I think that I lived in Idaho for a little bit as a kid while my parents were going through a divorce, and when I went back, it was kind of just all kind of a fog. When I went back this past summer, because I didn't really remember a whole lot of it because I was so young, but I remember things like, you know, we would take some family trips over to Redfish Lake, and, you know, I remember playing on my mountain bike, like learning to ride a mountain bike when I lived in Idaho, or just a bike in general, I guess I should say. But I just really enjoyed being outside as a kid when I lived in Idaho. And I think I learned to ski when I was in Idaho. My mom, when she was working as a part-time flight attendant and a part-time ski instructor, so she taught me to ski. And I just remember really finding my love for the outdoors as a little kid when I lived out there. And when I went, I'd never really seen the sawtooths though. And when I went to visit a friend out near the Tetons, who recommended that I go, you know, do a quick run through in the sawtooths on my way home, I was like, okay, well, I'll check it out. And I was just blown away at how beautiful this place was. And like the trails were runnable for the most part. And it was just, you're high up, it was like really, I remember it being really cold at night. And then during the day, everything just kind of warmed up. And like, I remember I paused at like a lake and just ate some food and like looked up at this like ridge saddle, and I was like, that looks really fun. Maybe I'll come back. I didn't have enough time. I was like, that looks really fun to scramble up, and maybe I'll go check it out. But so then I just kind of started looking at FKT routes to see, oh, well, like not to like run really fast, but to just see like what people run out there. And there's just so many trails that kind of interconnect out in that area, and they, you know, there's a lot of loops, and I really love loops. And so there's things that range from about 20 miles to 40 miles. I think there's like a 75-mile loop. So we'll see. I don't really know. I kind of have a kind of a loose plan for what I'll do out there, but I have registered for a race, out in the Pioneer Range. And I think, so I'm excited to do that and then maybe see what I'll do after that while I'm out there.
So this is the Sawtooth National Forest in Idaho?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. It's funny because as you were talking, I did a little bit of research. It's unbelievable how many sawtooth. I think every state has at least 2 sawtooth. And it's funny when you see the pictures, some of them are like, that doesn't look like a sawtooth. I don't know where you get this from. Perhaps there was some logging or something, but I mean, the ridgeline doesn't look very sawtoothy. I don't know. You feel like you need to give up your sawtooth name and give it to those places that actually have a gnarly ridgeline that represents.
I think that, like, the trail that I took, I forget the name of it, spacing on the name of it, but like when you kind of, I think it was like not too far in, you could kind of see these like jagged ridges that kind of remind me of like a sawtoothish kind of range, but it's very alpine-y compared to like the sawtooth-ish like terrain that we have here in the Olympics.
Well,
that looks very chossy.
Yeah, it is. Everything in the Olympics is very chossy for sure. I love that you always have these gigantic hairy big goals. I think that's fantastic. It's inspiring to me because, as I said, I currently am sitting around on no big goals. Like a few years ago, I was sort of in a lull during the winter month. And I decided to sort of by accident run every street in Olympia. And it's a completely different project and completely different goal, right? I've already been thinking about perhaps I should redo it, but it feels kind of dumb to redo something like that. But it would be one of those projects that you can actually do while it's grody outside and mountains are covered in snow and something. But that, while a worthwhile goal with a definitive end, obviously pales in comparison to some of your big projects that you're looking and dreaming about. So that's all super exciting.
Yeah, I hope that I can check at least one or two off the list and not be injured.
Yeah, and not be injured, exactly.
Yeah.
Build yourself up slowly and come back stronger.
Yeah. And I think like sometimes it's like I think sometimes my brain gets wrapped around like one big thing. And then, but then sometimes when I shift my perspective to maybe, three smaller things that add up to the one bigger thing that maybe I do relatively close to each other, maybe one day here and then one day there, but without like much recovery in between. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but like it can replicate, I think, a similar experience or effort that you have put into like something that's just really long all at once, because you're putting yourself physically through something that still can feel like a hard effort. And I think there's like something, just as powerful about that. And then, you're not like, worried like, oh my gosh, I've got like 40 miles left and I'm already feeling like garbage.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I've been fascinated. I mean, there are very few races like that, but Squamish, Gary Robbins' race up in Canada, he has that. I've ran the 50K and I've ran the 50 mile, and he has that 50-50 race where you run on one day the 50 miler and then on the next day the 50K. And I've been thinking about this, and I'm like, this is really fascinating because there are so very few races that offer that, and I kind of like the idea of trying to challenge myself with something like that. And your effort would be something similar, where you're sort of, rather than, again, right, with having this insane logistical challenge of having, I don't know, sleep on the trail or so,
right.
being able to rather do it in chunks. It's also a distance thing that I've been thinking about. But we over here, trail running so often is synonymous with ultra running, which often then accumulates in this everybody dreaming of this 100-mile distance. But a 100-mile distance, unless you're crazy fast and the route is very supportive, will be a very, very long time, and something that goes sort of beyond what we naturally can handle. But shorter distances, like when I ran Lumberjack, I mean, the race started very comfortable. Wasn't the race started like 8 in the morning, I think, or so, right? But
I think you said 9, which
or
I was
even,
like, whoa.
yeah, or even 9. So it was like really comfortable. But then I was finished at 5 for the 100K, and I was obviously slow, but 100K distance is still a huge effort, but you can sort of do it in one night. You don't have to really worry about keeping running the second day, or especially with a 100-mile, potentially even approaching a second night, which is a completely different effort. Requires a different level of recovery and everything than if you sort of do something more manageable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's also, I think at Lumberjack, it's a loop course, right? So you can come back and like you get back at the end of the 10-mile loop, and then you can kind of just pause for the time that you need and then go back out, which I think is really helpful too if you're trying to strive towards a distance that maybe you haven't done before, just to kind of have that flexibility.
I do. I think it was, I mean, it was midnight or something when I hit the fourth loop, and I came back to start and finish, and it was like this big party. And so it was very hard to go back out on the fifth loop in the pouring rain. But it was something where I felt it was definitely a lot easier to manage logistically. I had my own aid station at the trunk of my car where I was able to get back to. So there's definitely something to that for sure.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any plans for next summer?
I really don't yet. I really don't. Partially because this year was so discombobulated with 3 races when I didn't really anticipate it, and 2 of them were big travel races. And even though I DNF'd in Switzerland, the experience of running in the Alps, racing in the Alps, was such a momentous dream check off that I sort of feel, I mean, coming back, I felt very much in recovery mode, and now it's winter. But I've not really been longing for these trails around here, especially the accessible ones, because they just weren't the mountains in the Alps. And that sounds very arrogant, but I've sort of allowed myself mentally that break.
Yes.
And I'm sort of excited about sort of rediscovering my usual, trying to run and find trails straight from the front door without always having to travel with the car somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think, once I do that for a while, that's when I start to get excited about going further around here. And I mean, I do need a big project. I do. And I just, I'd be okay with not even completing it this coming year and sort of doing the way you've approached it, really scouting it out in various pieces and putting the pieces together. But, again, speaking of Cushman 6, because it was sort of a route that sort of nobody had done before, I'm looking for something like that.
Yeah. I think that those types of projects are just like really, I think they just kind of like give you something, it just kind of gives you something to keep like chewing on and things to it's like reading a book and not really knowing how it's going to end, but wanting to continue. You're like, okay, what's the next chapter? And then you just and then you get more and more excited and just, I just love that about big projects.
Yeah, for sure. I think something that's approachable in mileage, but is reasonably inaccessible for me, for the amount of driving I like to do, is I think that there is a possibility of doing an infinity loop around Mount Townsend.
Oh.
And I've put a couple routes together, and one of them I just had a few too many miles on forest roads. And I've looked at the topo maps and saw there, if you head down the back, the north side of Mount Townsend, and then, the obvious one is take a left. I don't know what that lake is called that you circle around. But towards the right, there is a big, long forest road loop that you can take back to the main trailhead. But there is one place where you could sort of bushwhack, and it looks like less than a quarter of a mile, where you technically could connect to a forest road that is a dead end. And I just would have to figure this out once and see how much that's possible, because I think the big loop around is too many dumb miles to make it an exciting project. But the idea of a infinity loop I find super fascinating, and Mount Townsend
is very cool.
Mount Townsend is totally doable. And so that wouldn't be a project that would be crazy. But I also don't need crazy projects. I'm okay with doing something crazy in a very reasonable way. Right? Cushman 6 is not that crazy in miles and total vert and stuff, right? But it's it's accessible in a crazy way, or crazy in an accessible way. I don't know, one way or the other. And I feel like that Mount Townsend Infinity Loop would be similar.
Yeah, that would be so cool. I'd be really excited to see what that looks like when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I do need to, and you know, from Olympia, it's like a 2.5 hours drive to get to a trailhead, and so I feel like in order to do it well, I would have to do it at least. Would have to go at least up once and not worry about the actual summit and really focus on that connector piece and see what's possible. And that feels like a really cumbersome and pointless scouting mission if it doesn't work out, because you'd have to like run for like 3 or 5 miles just on forest and gravel roads trying to get to this place to see how you can connect it. I'll need to send you the Strava link once to show you what I mean, because I once scouted it out and I think it's possible. So I think it would be something fun to put on the map.
Yeah, I think when I drew out the Constance Pass loop, I think there were definitely some miles in there on gravel road, so that once I think you got out of Tunnel Creek, you had to get to the lower Big Quilcene trailhead, and I think the only way I could figure it out that was the easiest was to just have it go up the gravel road.
Yeah.
Which you still, I mean, it definitely added in some vert, which was like, well, you just did like 4,000 or 5,000 in like a few miles going up from Dosey Wallops to Tunnel Creek, but, yeah, I think sometimes you just have, you know, no option but to do the gravel road.
And I don't know for sure. I don't mind it, but I feel like it sort of becomes a different project if the percentage of gravel road is sort of more than I sort of want, right? Yeah. Because I think it loses a little bit and feels a little bit contrived. And so I need to look into that again. Perhaps I need to tackle that this coming year. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Well, you have France waiting for you, and you have incredible cheese and wonderful wine and hanging out with your sister. So I'm not jealous at all. I am excited for you. I'm excited for you to be able to take this trip and take your running shoes and hopefully get some good runs. And I can't wait to watch Strava to see you upload your runs over in Europe. I think that's one of the funnest things.
The titles will probably be like running in France, more running in France, running in France while drinking wine. all the things that are great about.
I know, but I think every title will have in the end that emoji of the head where the brain is blowing up. Because it's just so beautiful over there, and so you're going to be like running in France. Oh my gosh, my mind is blown.
Or just like the emoji with the eyes that are stars. That's like my favorite.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, exactly. The head exploding could also be you nursing a hangover.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
We will see. Steph, thank you so much for coming again on the show and sharing your story. Do you want to tell people where they can follow you? Do you want them to follow you?
Yeah, of course. They can follow me at Steph Decker, PNW. On Instagram.
And that's on Instagram. Fantastic. Yes. Perfect. So we'll link that in the show notes. Steph, have an incredible safe flight over there. Think of me when you're touching down in Europe.
I will.
Not too much, enjoy the time over there. But, I don't know, drink a couple glasses of wine for me or something.
I will. I'll cheers to you.
Yes. Love it. Okay, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Thanks for listening. Eat all the food, spend time with people you love, and find a trail in between turkey and pie or something. Oh, and before I go, get yourself a Single Track t-shirt at singletrack.fm.